Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Sir Jimmy Martin.
And I'm Jimmy Pa.
and Jimmy over here as well. Tonight, Patrick, your real name, we are actually going to be reviewing the sequel to 28 Years Later called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple.
Damon, 28 years later, The Bone Temple released in January of 2026, starring the likes of Ray Fiennes as Dr. Kelson, Shai Lewis Perry as Samson, Sam Locke as Jimmy Fox, Emma Laird as Jimmy Ma, Robert Rhodes as Jimmy, Gaz Al-Rufai as Jimmy Snake, Mara Bird as Jimmy Jones, Aaron Kellyman as Jimmy Inc., Connor Newell as Jimmy Shite, Alfie Williams as Spike, and Jack O'Connell as Sir Jimmy Crystal, as you mentioned, Damon, written by Alex Garland and directed by Nia DaCosta. And Damon, not too long later, definitely not 28 years later, definitely not 20 months later, but just around the corner from 28 years later is 28 years later, The Bone Temple.
Now, Patrick, we're not going to spoil the Bone Temple, but I do want to mention a slight spoiler to 28 Years Later, which, if you're watching this, you've probably already seen it, so I'm assuming you're not going to be spoiled by what I'm about to say. But I want to get a little vindication here, because 28 Years Later was ended up being kind of a weirdly divisive film. I heard a lot of people saying they loved it. You and I had it in our top 5. In reality, it was probably my number 2 film. I put it at number 3 just to kind of vary things up and put Weapons at number 2, but it was probably my second favorite horror film of last year. It was your number 2 as well, only behind Sinners. But there was a lot of people who didn't feel it. They weren't loving 28 Years Later. They liked like half the film. They didn't like the second half of the film. Anyways, but I would say probably the biggest point of contention that I heard from fans was the ending, where Spike goes across onto the main island, and he's like, I need to see what's out there in the world. So he leaves his dad in the safety of his other island behind, and he goes over there and he gets attacked. And while he's getting attacked, this group of tracksuit-clad wearing, blonde wig-wearing weirdos jumps out Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle style and saves him by literally doing like ninja moves and killing a bunch of the rage zombies. And every single person I heard that didn't particularly love 28 Years Later, that was one of their biggest criticisms, saying, what a goofy ending. Like, really? That's what we're going to do? Patrick, I'm here to say I'm vindicated, because if you've seen 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, no spoilers, that ending pays off in such a tremendous way in this film. I don't think we're here to review, and we want people to stay on the hook to listen to the podcast, but I'm here to tell you, Patrick, we may have just witnessed the best film of 2026 already. It is literally midway through January, and that's how good 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is.
Damon, we got a problem, because we might literally be talking about the best movie of the year. I mean, overall, I'm done categorizing it as a horror. I went on a late night rant last night after seeing it, and I said I'm done calling us horror movies and having to define us between the regular movies and horror movies. What I have seen with 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple solidifies what is so great about horror over the last, well, now 6 years. Now we're in 2026, with almost effectively 7 years of incredible horror in the 2020s. Incredible horror that is very much worthy. Now we've had 3 or 2 years in a row straight of, I would say, real serious horror films being nominated for Oscars. I mean, Sinners has, as of this recording, has not been nominated for Best Picture. I could put $1,000 down right now to tell you it will be nominated for Best Picture this year at the Oscars. Whether it wins or not is, of course, to be seen. Last year, The Substance and Nosferatu both nominated. 2 years running. If 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is not on the short list and is not nominated, it's a crime against all of cinema. We're dealing with one of the best movies I've seen in quite a long time. And I thought to myself, and yet last year was an incredible year for movies in general. And I thought to myself, if I had gone to the movies and saw one battle after another, and then the next night gone out and seen 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, I might have given The Bone Temple the edge over one battle after another. It's that level of good. And it goes all the way back to the most divisive piece of 28 Years Later, which was that ending, that kooky ending. And to me, I loved it. I go, this is a very, very Danny Boyle ending, where these goofy tracksuit wearing, wig clad guys come out and save this kid. and we didn't know a lot. We knew that Jimmy was looming in the background of that movie, and we didn't know what it was going to mean when we finally ran into Jimmy. And the end of that movie was sort of a way of going, "Hey, kid, I went through some shit when I was little too, and why don't you come roll with us?" Like it left on like an ambiguously high note. Weird, that's a weird way to say that's oxymoronic, but it was sort of a high note. But there was something under the skin where you're going, I don't know where this is going to go. Nia DaCosta says, "I'll do your movie, but I can't make a Danny Boyle movie. I got to make a Nia DaCosta movie. You cool with that?" They go, "Absolutely. We love your work. We love what you do with Candyman. We want you to do this." And she goes, "Cool, I got to take." She goes, "Also, by the way, I'm looking at your script, Alex Garland. Can I get some more zombies? Just a few more?" Yeah, I remember her saying this very specifically. What 28 years later, The Bone Temple is an incredible follow-up to what 28 years later was, that pays off the Jimmies and puts Spike in a brand new peril that I did not see coming, that I couldn't have predicted then. I did not know what we were going to see in this movie. And what I'm seeing is some of the most in-depth, most sociologically interesting takes that I've ever seen. But we're only talking about Jimmy and Spike right now. We aren't talking about the other big thing, which we will get to in spoilers. This whole thing is pretty much a spoiler movie to talk about. Nia DaCosta said, "Just back up and let me do my thing." And she gives you a horror movie, a movie that talks about today without ever saying today, which is amazing. Like it's not a heavy-handed movie at all. It's in every single nuance of this movie. Damon, I will be shocked if something overtakes this year. I'm being that serious.
Nia DaCosta deserves all the flowers for putting her personal touch on this movie and taking the material and basically saying, "Listen, I'll do your movie, but you got to give me creative control. I'm not going to just go out there and like have you in the background telling me what I did right or what I did wrong." And Danny Boyle, to his credit, said, "No, that's why we want you. We want you to put your personal touch on this movie. Like that's why we want you to do it." And Nia DaCosta deserves all the credit, but I also got to give credit to Danny Boyle and Alex Garland for the vision of this, because we live in a world in horror, Patrick, where you know that we are just like subscribed to horror sequels. It's just part of our DNA.
Yes.
And in more recent years, we have been part of like where movies are set up to be, whatever is a movie and a sequel, and a trilogy, however you want to say it. There's always like a vision, or it ends up being a vision. And when you watch some of these movies, I'm not saying they're all bad by any stretch of the imagination, but watching one movie going to the next, that they never really had a plan in mind. Like, I know the Conjuring universe was never set up as like, a 4-film series necessarily, but it felt like they lost direction, and like, especially in the third and fourth film, it's almost like they were just throwing shit at the wall. Like, what can we make that's kind of scary involving possession? They didn't really have a clear vision in mind, in my opinion. And then I know people are like, "Oh my God, here he goes again." The new Halloween series, that did not have direction. Patrick, I refuse to believe that David Gordon Green and the team there actually had a vision going into 2018's Halloween, which was a largely really good movie, and then doing what they did with Halloween Kills. I just refuse to believe that was they had this grand arc plan that was started there and ended there. But giving credit where credit's due, clearly, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland had a very clear vision of where this story was going to go. And the fact that they could, because remember, they made 28 years later, and then they went into production on 28 years later, The Bone Temple, like right after. Like, I think they wrapped production in like November. Everyone went home for the holiday, and in January, they started filming 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Because it saved costs, because they already had the sets and everything set up, and they're like, well, let's just continue. And that's why Nia DaCosta came on board, because Danny Boyle's like, there's no way I can finish production on this one, get it ready for release, and then go direct another movie. It's just not going to happen. So the fact that they had this vision in mind, and by the way, because you know as well as I do, if there's a downside of having a film get released, everyone reacts, and then you go back and change shit. Because they're like, oh, well, they didn't like this character, they really like this character, so we got to change things, we got to alter things, we got to do things differently. I'll bring up Stranger Things as an example. Like when Stranger Things came out, I ultimately didn't love that they did like the 3-piece release. Like just do it in 2 or whatever. But to their credit, like that was their vision. Now you don't have to agree with their vision, but they didn't have like there was no time for them to go back and be like, oh my god, everyone overreacted to part two. Let's change the finale. It was done in the bank. This was their story. This is the way they wanted to tell it. You don't have to like it, and that's fine. But they were like, this is our story. The fact that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland had a vision for these three films, and then you get to 28 years later, which again was kind of divisive. I loved it. You loved it. There's a lot of people who did love it, but there definitely were people who were not as, overly positive about that film. But they didn't care. They're like, we have a vision for what we want these films to be, what these sequels are going to be. So here, Nia DaCosta, here's my giant script. Yes, I'll put more zombies in for you, but now go make your movie. And here's the cast. They literally just got done filming a month ago, and now they're going to come back, and here's Ray Fiennes, and here's Jack O'Connell, and here's all these characters. Go do what you're going to do in this next movie. That movie was filming, you know what I mean, before we even knew what 28 years later was going to be. So, like, I have so much faith that they're going to close this out in the right way. They're like, I don't know what I have no idea what the third film's going to be like. They haven't officially even ordered the third film yet, but I think we're all pretty positive it's going to happen. But they had a very clear vision. And they didn't say, oh, well, they didn't like the Jimmy characters at the end of the first one. Let's change that. No. They knew it was going to pay off. And guess what? What we get out of Jimmy Crystal in this movie, once again, Jack O'Connell, fucking standing ovation. Because you have become one of the greatest villainous actors of our era. Like, sorry, Marvel, DC, like, whatever you've done to try to create villains, sorry, boys. You've not done what Jack O'Connell's done in 2 films. With Rimmick in Sinners and Jimmy Crystal in 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, this guy has literally become the villain of my lifetime. Like, I want him to be the villain in every movie now. But the fact that they didn't have that, they had unwavering confidence in their story and their actors. Like, I know that ending might be goofy, which, if you see Danny Boyle's movies, he does a lot of goofy shit. It just always seems to work out for him. But people were like, oh, we hate Jimmy. Oh, we got to take Jimmy out. No. They knew their vision. They stuck to it. And then when you get to 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, they're like, here's why you're going to both love and hate Jimmy Crystal. And it pays off in such a huge way in this film. It's unbelievable.
Damon, what we have here is, and you talk about Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. I knew we were getting into something when they jumped back on to this. I go, they clearly know what they're doing, because if you know, these guys are very serious guys. And when I say serious, like about what they do, about what they make. So I knew that when they came in, they had a plan. They had something very specific planned. And what I love about how they planned it is they said every movie, and now I'm realizing, now that we're looking at 28 days, 28 weeks, 28 years, and the Bone Temple, each and every one of these movies stand on their own. Now, 28 years and Bone Temple, they obviously have some very clear connective tissue. But with a few, and I say very minor tweaks, I could show this to someone who has seen none of those movies and they would understand what's going on. This movie, 28, the Bone Temple, is largely self-contained. There's just one there. I would say there's 2 elements that you really need to know, or at least understand as best you can, from the last movie. But these movies are self-contained. They speak their own language. They tell their own story. They don't rely on the last movie to tell their full story. Like, you don't need it. You really don't. It's crazy to think that the Bone Temple, even though it's characters we were introduced to and fell in love with in another movie, this is a different story. Think about it. It's not a continuation of the story that we saw in 28 Years Later. It's not. That was that story. That story's over. This is this story. That's one thing. The other thing, you talked about Jack O'Connell being one of your favorite guys. I realized something when Jack O'Connell has made a splash on the scene in this last year. Jack O'Connell is entering his Gary Oldman era. There was a time where Gary Oldman was a character actor, and that's not a bad word. It just means that you're a guy that kind of comes in when they need someone colorful and big, and you do your thing. And Gary Oldman lit the world on fire in the early 90s, playing villains, playing weird side guys. Like, he played strange stuff. And Jack O'Connell's right there. And clearly he's got the chops. And you're going to see it in Bone Temple, because the Bone Temple is much more a Jimmy Crystal story. And you're going to find out why. this guy's ready for the big leagues. He's showing you in this movie he's ready for the big leagues. But don't take that as him taking over this movie, because Ray Fiennes was like, yes, I know I'm a prestigious actor of screen and stage and all this stuff, but I am going to show you why Ray Fiennes is a name to be respected in this business. These guys did not come to play. They came to give their absolute best. Everybody comes to get, not just those two. Nia DaCosta said, I'm going to show you my best work. And I was like, I think this might be it. This is a best director worthy type film for its own very special reasons. I'm blown away. This is one of my favorite Alex Garland scripts, hands down. I know a lot of people love Alex Garland. To me, this is my favorite Alex Garland script by far. And I really like 28 Years Later. I really like 28 Days Later. But I love this script very specifically for what it does and how it does it and how it unfolds. And ultimately, I don't have to ask anybody to check out all the other films and get caught up on the Bone Temple. Guess what? You can listen to this podcast. You can pack your bag. You can buy your ticket. You go sit in a theater and go enjoy the Bone Temple. You don't worry about the other movies. Just sit in. You got some questions? Pause at spoilers. Come back and we'll have all your answers.
And I know I say this a lot when we talk about what I like to call like prestige horror films. What I mean by that is like a studio horror film with like really well-known actors. And I always say that when you can start the game with Ray Fiennes and Jack O'Connell, or like Sinners with Michael B. Jordan and Haley Steinfeld and Delroy Lindo and all those, you're ahead of the game. You're already ahead of the curve because you have such talented guys. Now, by the way, we do champion indie horror. We just championed a little film that came out last year that I absolutely love called Marshmallow. Top 10 for me. End of the year, they're doing a sequel now. Very, very happy for the filmmakers. And we've championed other independent horror films. But when you can have an Amy Madigan come in and steal the show playing this crazy Aunt Gladys in Weapons, you're just ahead of the game because Amy Madigan is a really, really good actor. Michael B. Jordan, same kind of thing. When you can step in there and like Delroy Lindo, who's a legend in his own right, been around forever.
So great.
He's like he's like the fifth on the call sheet. You're ahead of the game. When you combine an Oscar-winning director in Danny Boyle and I think Oscar-nominated writer in Alex Garland to make 28 Years Later, and you've got a great cast. You've got an incredible cast from start to finish, everyone that was in that movie. And then you hand the reins over to Nia DaCosta, a very, very capable director in her own right, and done some incredible work on her own. And then you hand her, here's the script. You go do your thing. But by the way, you get to use Ray Fiennes, you get to use Jack O'Connell, you get to use all the other actors who are in this movie, Aaron Kellyman and Emma Laird, who are a couple of the Jimmies, and just all the way down.
And all the production team. I mean, great production designers, cinematographers, etc.
Yeah. You're it's like it's almost unfair. It's like, I'm not a big baseball guy, but I know like everyone's bitching right now that like the Los Angeles Dodgers have like the all-time team. They've literally bought every baseball player that's out there. They're like, it's not even competitive because they have every good player on their team. I don't like baseball, but I know that story. It's kind of like that. It's like an embarrassment of riches. You're already ahead of the game. Now, you and I know from plenty of experience doing this podcast that you can have a great cast and the movie can still be a pile of dog shit. Giving a great cast does not necessarily mean it's going to turn out to be a great movie. But having Ray Fiennes, I think he's won an Oscar, right? Am I mistaken? Has he won an Oscar? I know he's been nominated.
He's at least been nominated. Boy, I can check it out, but go ahead.
Yeah. So him and then Jack O'Connell, your two leads. I mean, you're already ahead of the game so far. And then you do it with a brilliant script from Alex Garland, and you do it with brilliant direction from Nia DaCosta. It's just like, okay, this is everyone winning. Everyone is stepping into this thing winning. But the reality is, just like when we review a really bad movie with a great star, you can't mess it up. You can foul it up. But I'm here to tell you, Patrick, Nia DaCosta doesn't foul it up. What Nia DaCosta actually does is she takes what Danny Boyle did, she takes what Alex Garland did, and she makes it even better. And that's not to say they're not great. They're incredible.
Yes.
I think what they're probably going to do with the third film is going to be awesome. But to me, she had the hardest job.
Yeah.
She had the hardest job. She had to take two incredibly well-known filmmakers who have worked together several times. They have a chemistry. They obviously have a way of working together. And she's like, I'm going to do it my way. Now, I'll tell you that this film, in a lot of ways, there are looks where it does look a little bit like a Danny Boyle. She doesn't completely, you're not watching, it's not night and day. You're not going from like Tim Burton on Batman to Joel Schumacher on Batman and Robin or whatever.
Right.
You're not going like where it just goes like what these are the same kind of movies. No, you're not going that. But I think she had the hardest job because she had to step into basically replace an Oscar-winning director in a story that she had no part of until now. And what she executes is just utter brilliance. And the performances, like I know you mentioned Ray Fiennes, I mentioned Jack O'Connell. I mean, all the way around. And I think the story is brilliant, the dialogue is great, the execution is great. When this movie was over, when it ended, I was like, can I get more? Like I think it was like an hour and 52 minutes long. I was like, can we get like a bonus scene? Can we get like an extra 10, 15 minutes here right now? Because I just want more of this. I want to live in this world. I want to exist in this world for another 20 minutes. Please, can I have more?
Yeah. Oh, Damon, listen, it left me wanting more. It left me cheering. I audibly gasped at one point. I mean, and I think that goes down to Nita Costa's skill. And we should really get into that because people are like, why? Why did you gasp? Well, I could tell you in spoilers. I can't tell you now. That would be a big spoiler, what got me to gasp. But what I can tell you right now is that Nita Costa put out something that is entirely her own, but exists in this universe in a way that, oh, I don't know, rivals the greats, Damon. I don't know. It's like you pass the baton from Martin Scorsese to somebody who, somebody like Nita Costa, and she makes like Goodfellas too, and it fucking rips, and you're just like, how did you do that? How did you make Goodfellas 2 just as good as Goodfellas? And you're not the person. We're actually going to see. Well, no, Michael Mann is doing the new Heat 2. So that's a moot point. But yeah, if it's like if you gave Nia Costa Goodfellas 2 and said go make Goodfellas 2 and see how it looks, or go make Godfathers 4 or 5 or whatever, like she went and did it. Like she really did. She really did something, and it doesn't take away. It actually makes me appreciate 28 years later more. It makes me appreciate the world that was built there. Because, and this is spoilers for that stuff. This is not spoilers for this movie, but in that movie was like, what's the world like 28 years on from this terrible attack? What's it like? And Danny Boyle says, it's like this, this is what's going on in England almost 30 years later. And hope still doesn't seem to be on the horizon for the surviving people that are being ravaged by this rage virus and having to survive on their own and really try to have normalcy in a very unnormal world. Nia DaCosta says, what if, yes, we have that world. Thank you, Danny, for setting that world up. Now let's get into the nitty gritty of what it's doing to people. Like how it's damaging people, how people are trying to cope in that world, and how people are trying to make that world better, like desperately make that world better. That's right in line with what I loved about what Danny and Alex did with 28 Years Later, which is they're saying, we're talking about the now times. We're talking about the here and the now, and we're examining aspects of it. We're examining aspects of people's lives. Nia DaCosta stuck to that, but did it in her own way. And I'm floored, Damon. I'm absolutely floored.
And real quick, I want to mention this to anyone that hasn't seen it yet, and we're going to get into spoilers. This movie kind of takes place in two parts in a lot of ways. You're following Jimmy Crystal, who is, of course, Jack O'Connell's character, who we met at the end of 28 years. Well, we met at the very beginning of 28 years later, then again at the end of 28 years later. And then Dr. Kelson, who is Ray Fiennes' character, who we meet about halfway through 28 years later. And those two characters are the central focus of this movie. And then at one point or another, they do collide. Like the stories do collide, like every great film like this would do. And the way that it unravels the story and the action and the execution is unbelievable. And I know we got to get the spoilers to really tell you how it unravels, but I marveled at like how well this was executed, because you're like, how is this all going to pay off? Like, how are they going to bring these like really, really like diametrically opposed characters together and make a cohesive story? I'm here to tell you, Patrick, it's not only cohesive, it's brilliant. It's a fucking brilliant way into this movie all the way around from start to finish. And I was just absolutely blown away. And by the way, for what is ultimately like a very super serious movie when you think about it, like there is some levity, there are some funny parts in this movie.
Oh yeah, I laughed a lot.
And when I say goofy, I mean goofy in a good way, like goofy funny parts. But there's also a lot of harrowing moments. There's a lot of drama. And this is just like I said. This is kind of. I'm paying a compliment here. Kind of reminds me of the way I felt when I left Sinners. You know, it's like this movie has everything. Like it's not just horror. It's
Yes.
not just drama. It's not just this. It's not just that. It's a little bit of everything. This is 28 years later, the Bone Temple. Like it's a little bit of everything, all stirred into one giant pot. And what comes out is an awesome stew, and that goes directly to Nia DaCosta and to Alex Garland for a script, and of course the performances in here. Patrick, should we get to the spoilers? I feel like we have to because there's just so much you can't talk about without getting into spoilers.
It's
Are
a
you
whole
ready?
new world, Damon. Let's get into spoilers. And right before we get into spoilers, I want to tell people, if you're pausing, go see this in the theater. There are so many big theater moments, and there's especially a big one. I know we're getting to that one, but if you didn't sit, I sat in a Dolby theater last night, and the chairs were just shaking at the spectacle that she puts on. This is a big screen movie. Do not cheat yourself. Go see it on a big screen. If you got to save up a little bit of extra dough to do it, I'm telling you, there are not a lot of movies where I'm telling you you should see this on the biggest screen possible. This is 100% a big screen movie. Do not miss out on it.
And don't forget to check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Rewinded Living Dead. You're going to get this episode days ahead of everybody else. So check it out, patreon.com/Rewinded Living Dead. $5 a month. You're going to get early access to all these episodes, as well as our recaps we did for Alien Earth and for It Welcome to Derry. We also do our Film Core podcast, which is where you as the patrons get to vote on one non-horror film per month that we get to do. So we've done Kill Bill, the whole bloody trilogy, or the whole bloody affair. We've done The Smashing Machine. We've done Superman. So check it out, patreon.com/Rewinded Living Dead. And with that being said, Patrick, let's get into spoilers. And I almost feel like we got to tell this, like tell the plot of this movie in two versions, because you got the Sir Jimmy Crystal, and then you got the Dr. Kelson story. Now, me personally, I love both of them, by the way. But getting to dive into the Sir Jimmy Crystal, Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal, excuse me, that character was so bonkers. And I admit, when you meet him at the end of the movie and you see all these kids wearing like colorful tracksuits, blonde wigs, and you're like, what in the, am I in a fever dream right now? Did I drop acid and didn't know it? We pick up pretty much right after they save Spike at the end of 28 years later and they introduce himself to the Jimmies. When we pick up, we are talking literally minutes later. He's at the bottom of a it looks like a pool or something in a gymnasium. Yeah. And they're basically saying, you got to fight one of the other Jimmies, and it's a fight to the death. If you win, you become one of our fingers. Jimmy is the fist, they are the fingers. And if you win, you get to join us. If you lose, you're dead. And so the one guy who's obviously much older, much bigger than Spike, who of course you know from the first movie, he's like taunting him and fucking with him. He's like, "This is no fight whatsoever." And then Spike stabs him in the femoral artery in his leg, and he bleeds out, and he actually becomes a Jimmy. That's his only way to survive. And so Spike becomes the latest Jimmy. And what we find out about Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal, he's convinced his followers that he is the son of Satan. Old Nick is what he calls him, and he talks to his father. He wears his little crown on his head, and he talks to his father, and he passes along the messages to his fingers. And what they do is they go out into the world, and they survive by ravaging anyone they find who are survivors. And they basically, they're out there to create mayhem and chaos, and anything you can imagine that Satan would do if Satan was real, that's what they're doing. And so, like, one of the main parts of the story is they go to this farmhouse where we found a group of survivors, a wife and a husband, some siblings and a father and everything, and they're hanging out, and they come back from like being out on a hunt, and they go inside, and all the Jimmies are just circled around the table eating the food, and you're like, oh shit, this is not going to end well for them. And you realize that Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal basically orders, through the orders of Old Nick, his father, who is Satan, orders his fingers to go out and basically torment, torture, and disemboweled, I mean, just whatever you can imagine, those horrific things possible to these people. And that's what he's been doing. And we saw evidence of that 20 years later. We saw the person who was like hung upside down and flayed alive, and it just said like Sir Jimmy or Sir Jimmy Crystal, something like that on the wall.
Yeah, Jimmy,
so we knew
Jimmy
this
is
was
Lord or something like that.
Yeah, Jimmy is God or something. Yeah. So we saw that in the movie, but in this one you actually see it unfold. So that is one part of our story. The other part of our story is Dr. Kelson, Ray Fiennes' character from the last movie. And we've learned that he is convinced there is a cure for the rage virus. And you remember, this is a 28-year thing, and he's a doctor. So he's been spending 28 years trying to figure out how to cure the rage virus. And he's kind of in a weird way befriended that giant alpha named Samson that we meet in the last movie, who is like a giant hulking dude, real life fighter, Chad Lewis Perry. And he also has a hog. He has a second person on him, by the way. He has a hog he's wearing around in the movie. But in
Parasitic
this,
twin.
yeah, very much so. But Dr. Kelson is convinced that he can cure these people. This isn't a rage virus that means death forever. And so in this movie, he continues to shoot Samson with those darts that have morphine in them to calm him down. But he realizes that Samson is coming back and not attacking him. He's coming back because he wants more of the morphine. He wants his mind calmed down, and that's the way to do it. And so Dr. Kelson gets the idea that, like, hey, like, he may not be having full-on conversations and, like, asking me to hang out with him or anything, but, like, he is showing up knowing I'm going to shoot him with this dart because it's going to calm his mind down. And so Dr. Kelson starts to realize, like, there is something else inside of Samson besides just, like, hey, rip apart a person and kill them dead. So those are our two kind of storylines, like, when we begin the movie.
And it's thematically actually very important and very relevant to 28 years later. In 28 years later, we're dealing with the aftermath of an incredible disaster, and you've got two sides of it. You've got the side of it, which is Spike's dad, who sees the rage zombies as animals, as objects to hunt down and kill. He dehumanizes them to the point that he calls them things. They are not people anymore to him at all. But in that same story, and 28 years later, Spike meets the doctor, and the doctor goes, "Actually, I give them names because they are people. I believe they're people still there." And we realize that the doctor has an incredible amount of humanity and shows sacrifice to Spike's mother because she is dying of brain cancer. And he's like, "Well, you have to help your mother by giving her peace, letting her die. We don't have modern medicine here anymore. And she's going to die a horrible death, or we can give her a peaceful death now." So he's a humane, very compassionate human being. And that picks right up in this movie because Dr. Kelson is just like, "Hey, Samson, I'm seeing patterns in Samson. He understands that when I hit him with the dart, his mind slows down. He's docile, and I can be near him, and I can talk to him, and I see just gentle reactions in his mind. And he knows to come to me to get healing. He had a bunch of arrow wounds and stuff, so he's coming to him and getting fixed. He's going, I see something here. How do we get there? I have theories." But on the flip side, now we're dealing with Jimmy. Jimmy, unlike Spike's dad, the tragedies that happened way back in 2000 have broken him completely. And he has lost his humanity. Whereas his father kind of reshaped his idea of the people infected by the rage virus. Jimmy Crystal has gone completely off the reservation. He's not well. He's very unwell. He has a God complex, and he believes that the only right thing to do is to commit atrocities. It's the only thing that can be done now is to feed my bloodlust personally. Because when he was a boy, we met him way back when, I believe he was about 8 or 9 years old when it happened. When we met him, he watched his family get ripped apart in bloodlust. He watched his father rejoice at the sight of it. His father was unwell too. He watched his father rejoice at the sight of the collapse of humanity, and it broke something in Jimmy's brain. And Jimmy decided, great, so I'm going to feed that for the rest of my life. I'm going to feed that monster. And he creates this cult of Jimmy. And the cult, and it's very much a cult. They have to worship him. They have to understand that he speaks to Satan and Satan alone. And you guys do what I do, and even to the point that you take away your name. My name is Spike, and your name's not Spike anymore. Your name's Jimmy. Everybody here is Jimmy because I'm the only thing that matters. Now we're into intense psychotic narcissism. We're dealing with this guy, and yet he's still very charming. He's somebody that seems very cheeky and fun to be around. But clearly, I mean, Spike understands the minute we jump into this movie, I fucked up. I should not have gone with the Jimmies. This is bad news. Jimmy is fucked. Jimmy is a genuinely fucked guy, and he is going to take Spike on the tour and show him, like, here's what it's going to be. Here's what life is going to be like with me. And it's utter misery. It's utter chaos. They're torturing and killing people. They're stealing their food, and they're gonna go all across the land and leave dead bodies in their wake. So who are the real monsters here? Samson, who is and this is something that's very interesting in this movie. This is the first time in the entire franchise we've seen this. We see the perspective of Samson when he's raging out. He's in the forest, and there's a guy that's hunting a non-infected human. And when Samson sees him, he sees the face of a ghoul. We see through Samson's eyes that that guy to him looks like something you must immediately kill. Whatever the rage virus has done is creating a perspective, how would I put it? It's perspective interference, and is creating this ghoulish vision in his mind his mind is racing at 1,000 miles an hour, and he's seeing a monster. So he's in a hyper fight or flight state all the time. And so he just sees this goblin, just rips his head off. He's going, what else can you do? Just rip his head off. So you have these different approaches to what the tragedy has done long term. Fascinating psychological study, Damon. Psychological horror, always my favorite. This movie is all about the psychological horror.
And then the two worlds combine when Jimmy leads his fingers into a barn to torture and kill this family that they kidnapped, and they took their food, and they're basically, giving them charity is what he calls it. And he's like, we're going to give them charity. And he's basically flaying them alive. And he offers one of them the sacrifice of, like, you could become a Jimmy. You just got to defeat one of the other Jimmys. And so the guy, the younger guy in the family picks Jimmy Ma.
Jimmy Ma, yeah.
Who was played by the great Emma Laird. If you don't know her, she was in the Mayor of Kingstown, which is a show I absolutely love. I've not seen her in anything else besides that, but she's great in this movie. And he picks her because she's like the smaller girl in the group, and he's like, I can take her. And you realize pretty quickly you're not going to take Jimmy Ma. She's a fucking badass, and she destroys him pretty quickly. But what they don't know is his wife, his pregnant wife, is hanging out in the barn watching all this happen, trying to figure out a way to save her family, and she ends up seeing a hook on a rope, and she swings it down and kills Jimmy Ma just as she's killing her husband. And so, of course, the Jimmies freak out, and then the barn catches fire, and some of the Jimmies catch fire. And so now, as they're fleeing and trying to catch this woman, by the time it's all said and done, it's Jimmy Crystal, it's Jimmy Inc., it's Spike, and it's like two other guys. Two of their other Jimmys have died. Jimmy Ma, one of their Jimmys dies, like, in the fire, and they're like, oh, whoa, like, we're supposed to be protected by Satan. We are supposed to be Satan's chosen warriors, and we're not supposed to die horrifically. Like, this has never happened to us before. And so Jimmy has to kind of go on damage control because they're all like, hold on now. I thought we were all, your fingers. You're the son of Satan. Like, what the fuck? And at the same time this is happening, while she's out, like, scavenging, trying to look for the woman who got away, Jimmy Inc. runs across Dr. Kelson. And what she sees is the giant bone temple that he's created, is like basically the giant cemetery to mankind. And she sees Dr. Kelson communicating with Samson. And she's like, this has to be Satan. He's covered in red goo, which is actually iodine, but he's covered in, like, red goo. It looks like he's like a red creature. And he's conversing with a demon, what they've been told are demons. That's what Jimmy calls them, demons. And he's like, that's got to be Satan. And so she goes back and tells Jimmy. Now, of course, Jimmy, as convoluted as he is, knows really there is no manifestation of Satan. But in his head, this is what he's been telling his followers. And so he's like, what? My dad? Old Nick? Huh? And they go and they scout it out and they find it. And sure enough, he sees it and he's like, okay, well, I'm in a bit of a pickle now because my entire crew has believed me for this entire time that I am the conduit to old Nick. I'm the conduit to Satan. Now they're seeing this guy literally commune with demons. Got to do something about this. And so Jimmy, he's like, hold on now. No one can talk to my father but me first. I have to go down and tell him that we're here to see him. Let me go down there and do this. So he's like trying to play the ultimate scam on his Jimmies.
And there's an important detail that you might have skipped over here, which is during that barn burn down, Spike is told to go get the pregnant wife who killed Jimmy Ma, and instead he doesn't let her go. He thinks she's going to take him with him, and instead she gets the jump on him and runs away. And Jimmy Crystal's like, so you're telling me she's dead somewhere in the woods let me guess, I can't find her? Is that how this works? Like, Jimmy's smart enough to know This is a line of bullshit. So he goes, I think we should probably just, you should pay the price for this because she was supposed to pay the price for this. And that's when Jimmy Ink comes in and says, actually, I think we should ask Satan because I saw Satan the other day.
Yeah.
And he's like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. And he doesn't like any of his authority being challenged. So he goes, again, he like you're saying, he pauses everybody and goes, I'll talk to Satan. That's my job. It's my dad. You don't want to go to him. He'll probably look at you and you'll melt. So do me a favor, stick around right here. I'll go talk to him. And that, Damon, this is where the movie really starts to get deeply, deeply interesting. Right around I can't remember exactly the timeline in the movie, but and I think it's right before this, Dr. Kelson gets a word out of Samson.
Well, don't
looks
forget.
up
Don't forget, he's Dr. Kelson has been injecting him with morphine for what we have to imagine now, like weeks at a time, and
Yes.
and he's trying to calm his mind to the point where he can see there's some humanity in him, something.
Right.
And Samson's on the morphine, and it's nighttime, and it's the night that I think Jimmy Ink sees him, and he's just like, Samson, I'd love to keep doing this for you, but I'm going to run out of morphine, and there's none within like a 70-mile radius of
Yes.
here. So sadly, I'm going to inject you and kill you because I can't keep giving you this, and I know this is why you're coming to me. I know there's something in there that you're coming back to me for this morphine, but I'm running out, and I got like 2 weeks of doses left, and then it's gone. So he pulls out like the injection, same thing he gave Spike's mother, and he's like, I'm going to inject you, and you're going to die. I'm sorry I couldn't do more for you. Puts the needle in, and as he does that, Samson looks up and goes, moon. Yeah. And Kelson shits himself. He's like, what? He said moon. He saw the moon, he said moon. And he realizes there is something inside Samson that hears him, that is calming down and becoming human on some level again. And so, yeah, then the next day, that's when Jimmy shows up, and Jimmy's like, let me go talk to my dad. Let me find out what's going on down there. So he goes down there, and Jimmy realizes pretty quick, like, this is like a doctor, and he's like, you're an atheist. I'm a believer. Satan. He's like, he says, you're going to be old Nick, and he's like, you mean Satan? He's like, yeah. And Jimmy knows he's bullshitting. Like, Jimmy knows this entire time he's bullshitting, which is great. Like, they never try to pretend that like he's like convinced he's actually Satan. But he goes to him and he says, listen. They have a conversation. Like, they have a pretty like civil conversation, weirdly enough. But then Jimmy's like, listen, I got my group up here. They all believe I'm the son of Satan. Now, they come down here and realize that you're just a doctor and not my dad. They're going to not believe in me anymore. So you need to help me convince them that you are Satan, that you are giving me orders, or I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
And Dr. Kelson's like, well, shit. All right. So he's like, you're going to put on a performance. You're going to do all this shit. You're going to convince my fingers that you are Satan. All right. And so he goes back and tells his crew, he's like, we're going to go out and meet my dad. Be careful. He's very dangerous. He's Satan, of course, but like he's going to come down, he's going to meet with you. You don't talk to him. I talk to him. And then like if he wants to grant you an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they go down there. And by this point, Kelson realizes he's in some deep shit because to this point, like, yes, the rage zombies are incredibly dangerous, but if there any zombie story you've ever watched, whether it's George Romero, The Walking Dead, whatever, you always realize humans are far more dangerous than the actual zombies because they still have thought and actual execution of things they're thinking about doing to you. They're not just mindless freaks running in rage. So he goes down and he puts on a performance. He's dressed, he's got black eyes, and he's covered in all the red for the iodine, and he's dressed, man. He's dressed to the nines. He's got fire all over, he's got candles lit. And when they show up, we find out Dr. Kelson has a record player in his little basement where he stays, in his little lair. And he's been listening to Duran Duran records the entire time, which, by the way, that was awesome. He's singing Duran Duran, Girls on Film. I was cracking up. I was like, this is awesome. Pulls out a record. Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast, puts on the record, cranks up the speakers. Remember, everybody in Jimmy's crew minus him is under the age of 30. So these people grew up in the rage virus. They didn't grow up like, oh, I know what Iron Maiden is. They grew up like well after. The song comes on, you hear like, if you ever heard the song Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, it starts out with like a little bit of a chant. He's like, welcome to the world that I, like that kind of thing. And he's
Yeah.
like, the number of the beast, 666, the number of the beast. And then it kicks in, and your Bruce Dickinson kicks in. And during this entire time, Dr. Kelson does like a performative dance with like a spear of fire. And I mean, this is where the movie goes from like where people are gonna be like, you're either gonna love this or you're gonna say this is the goofiest shit ever. I fucking loved it. I was like, this is amazing. This is like the peak pinnacle of taking a shot and scoring. I loved every bit of this performative dance from Dr. Kelson.
I don't know how you could not like this, especially if you see it in a theater, especially if you see the cinematic like largeness of it, because it is just a one-man performance trying to convince these kids who, like you said, were all most of them were probably born after the rage virus had already ravaged the country, and they have zero reference. Most of these kids, Jimmy's the oldest, so most of them are at least 10 years younger than him, I would guess at this point. Um, and they have no idea what the fuck Iron Maiden is, and they're hearing 666, the number of the beast. All these things that Jimmy has always told them is coming true. They have no frame of reference. He's manipulated their minds. They have no education over the history of England. And something I love that Nia Costa did is throughout this movie, it's English music. She respected the framework that this is an English movie about English people, because if you remember from 28 years later, we find out the rest of the world moved on. They just isolated England and kept it, and literally are protecting it by not letting anyone in or out so the rage virus doesn't spread. So these people they are so isolated. They are so like almost hyper nationalized, if you will. They don't know anything exists outside of their existence. That's saying something on a deeper level. It really is, if you really think about what they're doing there. All the while this is going on, and it's just this incredible display of hellfire and all this shit, which the kids just start to lose their minds. They're like, oh my God, we are in the presence of Satan. This is truly amazing. All while this is happening, Samson is back in the woods, back in actually the carriage, because something is calming in his mind. Dr. Kelson gave him a very, very hasty cocktail that he believed could maybe jumpstart his mind again by attacking the psychosis that it's going through. And Samson is starting to come back. Samson is starting to remember what it was like to be a human. He's remembering moments from when he's a child. He didn't say moon by accident. It's a core memory from when he was a child sitting on a train with his family, and he was looking at a book about the moon. So that's a core memory that comes back. Another memory comes back where, Samson was clothed and didn't have long hair and a beard, and he was on a train and someone was asking for his ticket. He's finding humanity again. And then he snaps to, and he's surrounded by rage zombies. And this to me was a very poignant thing. And I don't know if Alex Garland and Nina Costa meant it, but I sure fucking felt it. I think in that moment, she's talking about her and Alex Garland are saying, you are going to you might regain your humanity, but the world has irreparably been changed. Your humanity's back, but it's too late. Is it too late for the rest of humanity? You might find it. Will everyone else? And this, Damon, is a hanging question, because what happens all the way back at the other thing that's going on is, as the ritual winds down, Jimmy asks for all the grace and all the orders and the commandments from his father. His father grants them because he knows better. He knows, I need to get this guy the fuck out of here, or it's bad news for me, and I can't because I'm on the verge of fixing something. But then the masks come off of the kids, because again, Jimmy runs a cult and they can't have an identity in front of his father, which is not his father, is this guy that he clearly knows has a psychological advantage over him. The kids must be masked during this whole time, so they don't have an identity, because he's controlling and manipulating them. They are his, they are Jimmy's, they are not anything else. And the mask comes off of Spike, and Dr. Kelson's like, oh, fuck, oh shit. Jimmy's got Spike, and Jimmy's a bad, bad guy. I thought I was just going to let him run off into the woods in the middle of the night. Nope. I can't let this happen. And so in a snap decision, he goes, my son, I have one last request. just as God,
One last commandment.
one last commandment, excuse me. Yes, correct. One last commandment. Just as God asked that his only begotten son be sacrificed, you too must be sacrificed. That is the only way that we can have basically the cult of Jimmy be alive. The Jimists shall rise if I give you a sacrifice. He just thinks on his feet because he knows that the psychosis that Jimmy's going through, but Jimmy's not that far gone where he goes, I don't think so, pal. I don't think we're going to do that. But his acolytes, his followers, his cultists are like, no, your dad just said we have to sacrifice you. And Jimmy Inc. runs up and she's like, you're fucking dead, bro, because your dad just said that I have to kill you, and that's the rule. We all know he tells you what to do, so he's telling us what to do because we're Jimmy's too. It's all coming to a head. But Jimmy's a ruthless guy. And he immediately turns without warning and stabs Dr. Kelson right in the chest. And he's like, look, he bleeds. He's not a god at all. He was a liar, all that stuff. It just creates nothing but chaos in that moment. And the Jimmies collapse as a group. And it's all for what? It's free for all. And Spike gets a good hit on Jimmy Crystal. Jimmy Inc. gets a good hit on Jimmy Crystal, and they get him. They get him. You know, like they stop him. They stop him in his tracks, and Spike gets to have his one last moment with Dr. Kelson, and Jimmy Inc. says, "Let me do the bidding, please." Because someone has to nail him to the cross. That's part of the rule. And then you just hear off in the distance. Nia DaCosta doesn't show a ton of restraint in this show, but she does show restraint in the moment where Jimmy Inc. decides to nail Jimmy Crystals to the cross. And I love that. I love that it was just implied. You could hear the hammering in the background and the screaming and all of that stuff. We beat him. We beat Jimmy Crystals, but there's still a big fight ahead, Damon.
And obviously they crucified Jimmy Crystal upside down cross, which he built for his, memorial to Satan. And in Dr. Kelson's dying moments, he was like, I was fine with all this. I was fine playing my part. I was fine giving Jimmy what he wanted to save myself. But when I realized it was you, Spike, I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't let him have you. And Spike knows that Dr. Kelson's dying, and Dr. Kelson, does expire. And then obviously the other Jimmies, it ends up being a bit of a battle, and all the other Jimmies end up dying. I'm not going to belabor the point what happens. The other Jimmies, except for Jimmy Inc. Jimmy Inc. survives, and Spike survives. And the other Jimmies are dead in the fighting, and Jimmy Crystal's left for dead because he's stabbed, bleeding upside down on the cross, and clearly going to die, relatively soon. And so Jimmy Inc. and Spike leave. They take off their blonde wigs. She says, hey, my name's Kelly. And he's like, I'm Spike. And they're leaving together. They're going to find a new world. And after they leave, Samson returns, and he finds Dr. Kelson dying. And this is after he gave him a high dose of, I think he said antipsychotics. Like he gave him a big dose of antipsychotic drugs. And that, combined with the morphine, woke up Samson. And Samson comes back and basically says thank you to Dr. Kelson. He's like, thank you. I can't remember what exactly he said, but he basically talks to him. He has a couple sentences there, and you're like, holy shit, something's coming back in Samson. Like he's not all the way there, but he's not a rage zombie anymore. And you see him paying respect to Dr. Kelson as he dies, and you're like, holy shit, it worked. All this time, all this planning and execution and research finally paid off. So Jimmy Inc.'s dead, or excuse me, Jimmy Crystal's dead, Dr. Kelson's dead, Samson is humanizing himself again.
Yeah.
And then we have to talk about the ending. Mm-hmm. So we get a little cut, fade to black, and we pick ourselves up in a little cabin in the middle of England and a little girl eating and studying. And then we hear a familiar voice. It's a voice from a little movie called 28 Days Later. Our friend Cillian, why am I forgetting his name? Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, Oscar winner, Cillian Murphy.
Cillian Murphy shows back up as Jim, our once upon a time bike messenger, found alive and survived the original 28 Days Later. He now has a daughter, living in a cabin. We don't know what happened to the woman, his wife, the girl from the original movie. We don't know. They never addressed that. It's a very brief, like 2-minute scene. But he's helping her. He's teaching her. He's actually educating his daughter. He's basically putting her through homeschool as she's like at home. And he's teaching her, the history of England. And obviously, Jim is very much grown up now. He's very much, clearly, much older than he was in the original. I think in the original 28 Days Later, he's supposed to be like 23, 24, something like that. And now here we are all these years later. So he's like in his early 50s at this point, a dad, very educated. And they've lived kind of a solemn life on this farm they've kind of built for themselves out in the middle of nowhere in England. And then they hear some noise, which they're very familiar with because the rage zombies are still out there. And his daughter goes to the window with their binoculars and says, "Dad, they're out here. The rage zombies are running." And then she looks even closer and she says, "Oh, shit. There's people. 2 people running from the rage zombies, and they're trying to get over the fence into our little property here." And he goes outside. He has a rifle. And they look down, and you realize it is Jimmy Ink and Spike have wandered upon Jim, our original hero from the 28 Days Later, and his daughter. And she says, "Dad, are we going to help them?" He's like, "Of course we will." And that's where the movie ends, is Jim and his daughter saving or planning to save Spike and Jimmy Inc. And that is how 28 years later the Bone Temple ends. The return of Jim, the return of Cillian Murphy.
Cillian's back. And I think it's such a cohesive, it's not just like happenstance, and it's not just an accident.
Can I ask you, because you remember, I think when 28 Years Later was coming out, there was a story that Cillian Murphy was going to return. They didn't say in what form or fashion. They just said he's going to return. And I remember, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, but I remember you saying, "Oh, I wish they wouldn't even do that. Why do they got to bring him back?" Has your mind changed watching this movie that they brought back Cillian Murphy?
Honestly, not necessarily. It's just a nice bookend. Like, it's a nice bonus. It's cool. But I'm telling you how self-contained 28 years later and now subsequently 28 years of the Bone Temple are. They're self-contained. If it really was, let's just pretend that wasn't Jim and it was just some guy and his daughter, which, by the way, what I loved about that scene, it's a great Alex Garland moment and a great Nia DaCosta moment. Boy, I hope they work together again, because they work very well together. It's Cillian Murphy teaching his daughter history in a world that has erased history.
Yeah.
They're not just doing that by accident, Damon. And they're talking about the World War I and World War II and the fallout of one and what they learned from it, so that at the end of World War II, they didn't repeat the same mistakes. That was just a very simple message of those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. And they actually say that. They actually say that in the moment, but it's 100% true. They're saying something right there. So let's just pretend that was just some guy and they saw them running down the hill and said, "We're going to help them," because that's what good humans do. It could have worked even without Cillian Murphy. But is it a nice bonus? Of course it's great. I mean, come on. How would I not love that? Of course I love that. And what I'm hearing right now is that Cillian's in talks to be in the next one. So the odds are good. I'm sure the odds are good that he is going to be part of the beginning of the next one, because I have a strong feeling we're getting another one. But do I need him to be part of that one? Not necessarily, because this franchise has proven that it can self-contain each and every one of its movies while continuing on the existential, the emotional, the philosophical thread that started way back in 2001. And it was interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I agree in the sense of, like, it could have been anybody up there saving them. I get it, but like the bookend, because like when you think about George
And
Romero's
by the way,
Dead
I'm sorry to interrupt. Not just any bookend. It's the bookend from the end of 28 Days Later. It is the house. It is the hill by the lake where they ended up, where they put out the hello, everything. It is the same spot. It's a beautiful bookend.
Yeah, but here's what I like about it, because you're right. Every movie to this point has been a self-contained story. Now, we have had the continuation of characters, Spike and Jimmy from 28 Years Later and 20 Years Later, The Bone Temple, and Dr. Kelson. But like you mentioned, like if you saw 28 Years Later and you saw 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, they are very self-contained stories. Now, do they connect, and does it make it easier to understand if you've seen both movies? Sure. But it's not like, it's not like Star Wars where you have to know who all the characters are from New Hope to get to Return of the Jedi. Here's why I loved it though, is because 28 Days Later ends on a hopeful note. We see them outside with the help sign. You see a jet flying or a helicopter flying over. We're thinking, oh, Jim and everyone else, they're going to get rescued. So we end on like a very hopeful note. And by the way, just to put it out there, 28 weeks later had nothing to do with Alex Garland or Jimmy or Danny Boyle. This like does not exist in our world. 28 years later, 28 weeks later is not canon. So we're just setting that aside. They've said that doesn't. They're not factoring that into this movie. That wasn't their movies. They're like, we're pretending we're going from 28 days later to 28 years later. So like all the things you know about 28 weeks later doesn't exist in this world. So when 28 days later ends, we're ending on a very hopeful note. When we find out 28 years later, well, it hasn't really gotten better. All they've done is isolated England and basically said, hey, you fuckers deal with it on your own. You're dealing with your own shit. We're going to isolate you, and now you just got to like wait for this thing to kill everyone off, and you survive or you don't. We don't really care. You're not getting off this island. And so for that bookend, because I was mentioning like George Romero, when you watch his Dead movies, there's no through line. Like, we know they're all part of the same universe. You know, when you go from Night of the Living Dead to Day of Dawn of the Dead and then Day of the Dead, like, we understand it's the advancing zombie apocalypse. But, like, there's no through line. Like, Tom Savini doesn't show up in 1, 2, and 3 or what, you know, none of that happens. They're all part of the same universe, but not the same characters. The reason I love the Jim reappearance is because they didn't make it goofy. They didn't make it like, he doesn't show up in 28 years later and he's like the lead scientist now. Like, he's not Dr. Kelson. Like, well, he's a bike messenger when there's no education and now he's a doctor. What? Yeah. Like, you know as well as I do, Patrick, there's some director who would have gone that route. Like, oh yeah, he was a bike messenger, but by the way, we didn't tell you he was also a nuclear physicist or whatever. You know, they don't go that route. And so I remember I have friends who live in Ireland. And I remember talking to them. They were over in the States for a fight. We were hanging out, having some drinks one night. And I was talking about I'd driven down. I can't remember if I drove to Chicago or I drove to Philly or something. I was like, it's like a 5-hour drive. Like, 5 hours? You can get to the top and the bottom of England in 5 hours or what? Some number. They're like, my God, that's like traveling halfway around the world. I was like, not in the United States. Trust me. Like, 5 hours is nothing to us. I promise you driving. So you got to remember, largely England is not a huge. It's not, you know, it's not North America. It's not Africa. You know what I mean? Like, you're not driving from freaking, you know, Morocco all the way down to South Africa. Like, it's not an easy drive. But in England, it's not really. I mean, it's a big enough country, but it's not huge. Like, Texas is bigger than England. Like, it's not like this huge place. So you got to realize, like, there's going to be overlap here or there somewhere along the lines.
Yeah.
And the idea that they just happen to be close to this cabin where Jim and his daughter have been living for the last 28 years, and hopefully we'll find out what happened to Selena, the wife or the woman he was in love with and obviously rescued, and clearly his daughter's mother. We'll find out hopefully in the next movie what that is, but just happenstance. He's teaching his daughter. They've carved out a little peaceful existence in this cabin. They got farms. I think there's chickens in the yard, something like that. Like, they're raising it. They got animals. They're living. He's educating his daughter, and these two people just happen to come upon them. So it's not goofy. You know what I mean? It's not like Jim shows up with a rifle and a dagger and kills Jimmy Crystal, and, you know, like, they didn't do goofy shit. Yeah. It's Jim to the rescue. He rides down his fucking bike or something. No, they just have him happen to be there.
His bike. Rides his bike. Yeah, I know. That'd be so funny. He's on his fixed gear, throwing his, like, you know, mace or some shit.
He's got his extra bicycle chain as a weapon. Like, but you know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't make it some goofy shit. You know what I mean? Like, he just happened to be in a cabin where Spike and Jimmy Inc. just or Kelly, I guess we should call her now. They just happened to be running from rage zombies, and they're trying to find some way to get away from these rage zombies. That's just happenstance. It's just, you know, coincidence. I love that ending, and it was just like the perfect way of saying, hey, Jim is still here. He's still in this universe. He's still alive. Now, how they carried that out and what that plays out in the next film, we'll have to wait and see. But I have a feeling, I mean, Cillian Murphy is an executive producer on this movie. There's no way he's not coming back. I think it's just a matter of, like, getting the deal done. But clearly, like, he was doing interviews during the premiere and stuff. Like, clearly he's invested in this universe, so he's gonna come back.
And I'm happy too, because just because of what you said, is they're doing it tastefully. This is what happens when you take high level storytellers and bring them into this world. Everything about this is high level. Everything about this movie is high level. That's when I said at the beginning of this podcast, I think we're dealing with the best movie of the year. And we breezed through it, really. We didn't deep dive. There's so many emotional and deep moments in this movie. It's a very small, very contained movie. If you really think about it, it is really what the Jimmies are getting on with at the little homestead that they attack, and what Dr. Kelson is getting on with at his bone temple with Samson. It's those two things. Very efficiently done, very efficiently told, but so deeply woven into, honestly, not even American culture, world culture after 9/11, world culture after COVID, world culture after, certain large political shifts. I think you know where I'm going with that. The rise of fascism across the world. I don't want to pinpoint anywhere aside from America. There's a lot of places where that is the case. And these movies, and I say these movies because they are all companion pieces that really can stand on their own. I'm so proud of them for that. I said it, and I don't know what your thoughts are, Damon, before we get into categories, but I said it last night on my little TikTok rant. Best franchise of the 21st century. When you really break each one of these movies down, even Weeks, which I know is like, it's not a bad movie at all. I just know that it doesn't necessarily like tie in with all of this stuff. It's not a bad movie either. Name another franchise this good. Like, yes, there are consistent franchises. Yes, there are franchises that are good at what they do. But now that we've laid bare four movies now, four really solid movies with a fifth very likely coming. And the proof has been in the pudding each and every time that these movies are complete. They are full movies. They are a 10-course meal, Damon. And I absolutely love them. I do think this is the best franchise of the 21st century.
I think you're right, and let me just say, compare it to another franchise that clearly I love, and I've said is probably the most consistent franchise in recent history, and that's Scream. I still love the Scream franchise, and I think Scream, the original Scream, is like one of the greatest horror films ever made. It made me fall in love with horror again. And I've said, like, even the worst Scream movies, if you want to say Scream 3 or Scream 5, however you want to categorize it, they're still watchable movies. They're still, like, largely enjoyable movies. They are not goofy or stupid. They don't go down the Halloween Resurrection train or any of that stupid shit. They don't become Freddy's dead. By the time you get to the sixth film in Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm like, all right, just kill this fucker. Let's be done with it already. Scream does Scream get goofy? Yes, I understand that. It's going to get that way when you get to 6, 7 films. But largely, they are still, like, mostly enjoyable films. But I know what I'm getting with a slasher. Now, you can I hate the word elevated, but you can get into like a little deeper with a slasher. If you want to even call it a serial killer story, however you want to say it. Yes, you can get a 7. You can get those kind of movies that are like technically a serial killer slasher, whatever you want to say, and they are much, much more intense, much better written, all those kind of things. But Scream has probably been the most consistent franchise. But even I consider and say, well, Scream 3 had its issues. Scream 4 I really like. Scream 5 I have much more issues with now that I've seen it a few times. And I actually really like Scream 6. But yeah, I can pinpoint a couple things. I think like 28 days later, go back and listen to our review. We filleted that movie left, right, and center. It's basically a perfect film. It's a great horror film. And it holds up, by the way. We did it like last year and it's been out since 2001 or 2002. 28 weeks later, while not part of this canon, it's now kind of separated out because it wasn't Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. Still a pretty good movie. I like that movie. It's a pretty good movie. 28 years later was my number 2, number 3 horror film of last year. And if there are 5 better movies than 28 years later, The Bone Temple in 2026, I will fall off a fucking cliff. Because this is like right now, I'm like, man, like you just set the bar like to the point of like impossibly high for the rest of the year. Like you got you got some work to do. Robert Eggers' A Werewolf and all the other movies we talked about coming out this year. You're absolutely right. This is the best franchise. And listen, they got one more chapter to go. And yes, just like every other franchise, we got to see how they close it out. It does matter. I refuse to believe it doesn't matter. It does matter because Halloween. But I think I agree with you because like this is a different kind of film than like as much as I love Screams are pretty simplistic films. They can be very well written. The first one is incredible. Yeah. I mean, it's changed horror forever with the way Scream was written. The original Scream was written with Kevin Williamson. But these are so high level, and these films are talking about so much deeper shit. And the execution of these movies, and I think it's also a marvel of modern filmmaking that you can make a movie comes out in 2002. We get a new film 20 some odd years later, and it's just as good. You don't skip a beat. You know how hard that is?
It's
That is
insane.
so
I think
hard.
it's impossible as we've watched other franchises resurrect. The only other thing that comes to mind, weirdly saying it, is Top Gun Maverick. Is the only other. I don't know if you. I can't remember if you watch Top Gun movies or
I
not.
did. I love it. I love it.
But
Yeah.
Top Gun Maverick was like surprisingly great. Not good, great for what it was. It had a couple cheesy moments, but you're just going for something that was like just sort of a nostalgia revisit. I can't believe it got that good. This is not a nostalgia revisit. This was creatives saying, we still have something to say about all of this. It's we're not done talking about it. They when I say they take it serious, like as you said earlier, there's still plenty of fun in this movie. I laughed a lot in 28 in Bone Temple. I laughed a lot. There's plenty to laugh at, but the creatives behind it said we still have lots to say. Like it, and let's be honest about how we feel about the world, because that's what the 28 franchise is for. It's for filtering society, right? We talked about this with We Bury the Dead, how a great zombie film, which technically 28 falls under, a great zombie film, it has a core theme. And the 28 franchise is genuinely talking about the world at large and how it has changed after the turn of the 21st century. The 21st century has ushered in unprecedented event after unprecedented event, and it's had deep effects on society at large. And the artists had something to say about it, and they knew the time to pounce again. And as long as Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, and now Nia DaCosta, who I insist is an executive producer on everything 28 related from this point on, if not a director once again, these people have things to say about the world. And they're doing it through horror movies, and they're doing it in a way that is entertaining, that is funny, that is fun, that is thrilling, that is bloody, guts, gore, action, comedy. You want it all? We got it. We got it for you right here and delivered in a pristine package.
And I have so much faith in what Alex Garland and Danny Boyle and now Nia DaCosta have crafted. I have no doubts what I'm going to get into for the third film, but I'm curious real quick before we get to categories. What do you expect in this third movie in this series, or I can technically guess fourth movie, but like what are you? Or is there anything you're hoping for? Or are you just like give me whatever you got?
This was originally going to be a closing category for us, but we'll go ahead and just jump it to now. I see storylines converging, and I don't think it's an accident. Killian Murphy's character Jim is back on the scene. So you have Killian, who's learning that there are people out there surviving, but not just that, Damon, because what those people that are coming to him are going to tell him is, we knew a guy and he found a cure, but the problem is he's dead. But there's an alpha who is no longer an alpha. And all of a sudden, that alpha is going to be able to tell them a little bit about the cure. So you've got Samson, you got Spike, Kelly, Jim, and let's not forget Damon, because this was no chop liver. You've got Spike's dad, who we last left sprinting into the woods to find his son. And I'm guessing that Spike has been with the Jimmies for all of 5, 6, 7 days. Not that long. It won't take long for Spike's dad to track him down. And he's got deep opinions on everything. And he wants his son back, understandably, and he loves his son deeply. All these storylines are going to converge in the next movie. And I'm very curious, to me, what it's going to look like when they all collide, because every single person in this franchise is going to converge, and they all have a very specific goal in mind. And that's exciting. That the stakes of that are incredibly exciting. And you've got a countryside full of zombies that have no alpha to control them, no alpha to tell them to stand down. They are back to full rage zombies. Here we go, Damon.
My guess, my prediction, if I'm going to make a prediction, I'm sorry I did skip ahead with the category. I just want to talk about it now. Um, My prediction is I think Spike is going to ask Jim to help him get home because now he's seen what's out in the world and he's like, you know what? I think I'm good. I think I've seen enough. Like, let me get back to my island of solitude where there's not zombies chasing me around the world and I don't run into fucking Jimmy Crystal. And so I think Jim's going to be hesitant to do that, but his daughter's going to convince him like, hey, they need our help. Like, you told me about humanity, what we are, and what we could be, and what we should be. Let's help these people. And so I think he's going to try to help Spike get home, and they're going to run afoul of Spike's father. And Spike's father is going to have some sort of confrontation with Jim and his daughter. And I'm hoping, hope beyond hope, that it doesn't just turn into like Reservoir Dogs where they just fucking kill each other because they're like at odds because he's like, you kidnapped my son or whatever. But I think that like because what I like about this is like as crazy as the plot was in 28 years later, the Bone Temple with like Dr. Kellison basically curing Samson and then Jimmy Crystal being a fucking wackadoo cult leader, and then those two stories converging into Iron Maiden fucking fire dancing and crucifixions. These stories have still all felt pretty small when you think about it. You know what I mean? Like even 28 days later, like they escape London, they're trying to get away and they run into the fucking wackadoo army people and they have to escape the army people who ends up being more evil than the rage zombies. But still a very small, we're not, 28 weeks later got a lot bigger, which is why I don't think Danny Boyle and Alex Garland really like that movie because it just got really big. We're bringing the military and we got like fucking quarantine facilities. It turns into a much bigger movie. 28 years later is very small too. We got people living on this island. They travel across the other world to gather supplies and they go back. And then Spike's mother gets sick and he takes her over to try to get help from this doctor they know exists over there, but his dad won't let him go. It's a very small contained story. And even though this movie gets a lot bigger in terms of like the wackadoo shit that happens, it's still a very self-contained, very small story. So I don't think they're going to go down the road of like Samson has now cured everyone and like they've gotten the fucking biotech team flying in. I think at some point Samson's going to reappear and have to stop a rage zombie from killing a human, and that's going to be like their cue to like, hey, like these people can be saved in some, and I think they're going to leave it on a note of like hope, like Samson saves them from a bunch of rage zombies, but he doesn't come after them. And they're like, oh shit, this is not what we've ever experienced before. And I think that's going to give us like a little bit of hope going into whatever, the end of the franchise of basically saying there is hope that this could be stopped, that this world could be saved. But I don't think we're going to get into some kind of big grand, like Samson's now a doctor hanging out, Dr. Kelson's fucking, none of that. I don't think any of that's going to happen.
No, the conflict I think is going to stay small because and consider this, I think that Samson moment is probably going to come somewhere at a point where Spike and his dad are reunited because remember Spike's dad is coming towards them. He's coming towards the horde to find his son. So they are going to be pinned down by a horde of uncontrolled rage zombies. Samson's going to come in, and remember, Spike's dad has seen Samson. Spike's dad has shot arrows into Samson. He knows that guy as nothing human, but now that guy can talk. There's going to be some real conflict there. There's going to be some real pushback there from Jimmy's dad. He's going, "I'm sorry, that guy tried to rip heads off." Yeah, I don't think so, pal. I don't think I buy this. And Samson is only probably going to have just limited capacity to communicate, but he's going to be evolving back towards his human self. So I think the big philosophical question from this next movie will be, can humanity prevail? Which is the grandest question that the 28 franchise has been asking this entire time. Can humanity prevail? Can it prevail over the collapse of society, over the collapse of humanity, over the collapse of compassion? Can humanity prevail? And I mean, I think Danny Boyle, I think Alex Garland, I don't think they're hopeful anymore. That's based on the movies that I've been seeing, especially from Alex Garland. If you watch Alex Garland's last few movies, he's going, I think this is where the world is headed. I think this is really where we're headed. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the old guard comes out with, and Nia DaCosta, who is a newer and younger director and comes from a completely different culture, what she's going to say, because I guarantee you she's going to have a say in what's next, because she knocked this out of the park. And she's going to say, but here's the things you have to consider. Here's the good you have to see in all the chaos. Don't forget this stuff. Don't forget this stuff too. I'm very excited for whatever's next, Damon. Unfortunately, now the problem is the anticipation is far too high. because I'm bowled over.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So with that being said, Patrick, let's get into some categories. Let's kick things off as we do each and every week on the show and talk about best performance. Can I just say everybody? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fair.
No. Patrick, who did you give best performance to for 28 years later, The Bone Temple?
It was a tough choice. It really was. But ultimately, I went with Ray Fiennes as Dr. Kelson, because I think part of me, as jaded as I'm getting in this world, as tough as it's getting to wake up every day and look at the news and see where things are headed, a character like Dr. Kelson gives me hope that there are still people out there that literally covered in the muck and the mire want to make the world better. And that's exactly what the way Nia DaCosta frames Dr. Kelson in this movie, as somebody who wants, in with hoping against hope, with working against all odds, believes 28 years after all this hell has ravaged everything he's ever known and loved, he wants to believe that these things can happen. He wants to believe the good can happen. And then Ray Fiennes comes over and brings the hellfire and raises hell and takes the form of Satan to try and, to stop Jimmy. Ray Fiennes is firing on all cylinders. Ray Fiennes insists that he show you just how good he can be. All these years later, because he's had a very healthy career in the business. I was bowled over by him. It's almost a continuation of what we got in 28 years later here in the Bone Temple.
I mean, Ray Fiennes being great isn't surprising because Ray Fiennes is always great. Like, he is just such a good actor. And like I said, when you can get a guy like that into your horror movie, you've already elevated the game beyond what anyone should probably expect out of any horror movie, even though these are, Academy Award directed movies. Yeah, Dr. Kelson is a great character and fascinating because we hear about him, and 20 years later, he's described like this madman, former scientist, madman doctor.
Yeah.
And, Spike is so desperate to get his mom medical care, and he takes her to Dr. Kelson. We realize he's not. He's actually a good dude, like a really good guy. He's just surviving on his own out in the wild. And this movie kind of continues that storyline. And by the way, we get a little bit of like surrender in Dr. Kelson too, where he's like giving up. He's like, this just isn't working. I'm trying to save you, Samson. It's just not working. And he's ready to just kind of euthanize him, put him out of his misery. And then, Samson actually speaks and he's like, oh shit. And so he has hope again. And then Spike gives it to, even though he has to sacrifice himself, he's like, I couldn't let you be with him, Spike. Like he tells him, he's like, I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't let you stay with these fucking psycho weirdos in blonde wigs going around telling they're the son of Satan. I couldn't do it. So, like, we realize that Dr. Kelson's one of the good ones. But for me, Patrick, my best performance goes on the other side of this performance, this entire movie, and that is Jack O'Connell as Jimmy Crystal. As I mentioned earlier, Jack O'Connell has now played two iconic villains in back-to-back movies. He played Remick in Sinners, and he's now played Jimmy Crystal in 28 Years Later. Now, I know that Jack O'Connell has more range than just playing villains, but he also played a villain in Eden Lake. I don't remember that movie. He was in that movie as well, where he played a fucking insane kid. Jack O'Connell's going to get leading roles where he's a good guy. He's going to get Oscar-nominated roles where he's in some kind of weird, melodrama. I don't know what it's going to be. But for right now, back-to-back, this guy has played two of the most compelling, convincing, weirdly likable villains. Like, yes, like
Mm-hmm.
you don't like you're not supposed to root for him necessarily, but like you don't totally hate the character. Like they got to be. I think the best villains are the ones that have a little bit of charisma to them. You know what I mean? Like they don't have to be just be like this one note evil character. Why do you think, going back to Star Wars, why do you think so many people fell in love with Darth Vader? Like he wasn't just this one note, bad guy. Like there was a little bit of nuance to him that people liked about him. And like no one ever rooted for the Emperor, but everyone found a way to kind of root for Darth Vader, or in a way.
Yeah.
I think Jimmy Crystal's out. Like, you're not rooting for him. You don't want him to win. He's literally flaying people alive and shit and like trying to kill pregnant women. But there's such a weird charisma, such a weird swagger to him. You're kind of like, he's kind of like, you don't hate him. He's just like a one note evil character. I think Jack O'Connell's brilliant. And I think that you mentioned Oscars. Like, if Jack O'Connell and Ray Fiennes aren't nominated for something out of this movie, there's something wrong with the Academy.
I mean, there really is. And yeah, Jack O'Connell is on a run, and I think that run is going to continue. He's working a lot right now, and for good reason. He's a very good actor, and there's so much layer to what he puts into a character I think of some of the moments when he's talking with Dr. Kelson, and he's really flipping between, because he has lost his mind. I mean, there's no debate about that. Like, he is hearing things. He is seeing the devil at times, and at times he just has to come to grips with, like, oh man, like I'm sitting here with a guy who's really smart and knows what he's doing, and I have to consider that as well. Like he's of two minds about the world that he's witnessing, and the things that they're unfolding in front of him. He's a complex character. We like complex characters. We like characters that are charismatic. And boy, even in real life, I can tell you some of the most charismatic people are incredibly evil, because they know if they can bring you in close, they can strike. They know that attracts, and he's playing characters like that, and he's doing it in tremendous fashion.
Yeah, he's awesome. And like I said, honestly, you could just give the award to the entire cast because it's all like they're all good in this movie. I also
Yeah.
want to give credit to Chai Lewis Perry, a former fighter, who's displaying a whole lot of emotion and like real docile reactions in this movie. Like he's just like a fighter in basically his first acting role, maybe second acting role. Really impressive, by the way. Got to say that. So
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Samson will break your heart, and not just with his 12-inch dick.
yeah, he will hit you with a hammer that's not a hammer. Patrick, our next category are MVP. So when it comes to 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, who gets your MVP, the most valuable person for this movie?
Damon, it shouldn't be any surprise. The handle is Director Patrick, and that's because Patrick likes watching directors do their work. Nia DaCosta is a phenomenal director, and has taken not one but two iconic horror franchises and made them entirely her own. She's put a stamp and a modern voice on franchises that didn't necessarily need a new idea. She said, I'm going to give you a new idea. I'm going to show you a new way in, and you're going to love it. And every inch of it is thoughtful. Every bit of it is incredibly intentional. And she puts together image, word, sound, music, they all culminate in this symphonic blend that just soars into the air, Damon, like a raging pyre in the middle of the night at the Bone Temple itself. I mean, it is pageantry, it is dynamism, and Damon, she did it with Alex Garland's script. She took Alex Garland's script, and Alex Garland, one of the biggest names in Hollywood in terms of people who write screenplays, and said, "Allow me, please." She took one of the top screenwriter scripts in the entire business, and made it her own. It doesn't tell me that feels like an Alex Garland movie. It doesn't really. The societal implications are always there, of course, but it's Nia DaCosta's vision. It's Nia DaCosta's heart and soul on screen, and I'm just bowled over. I have to go back and watch every Nia DaCosta thing ever.
So you're right. The real answer is Nia DaCosta, but I'm going to give my MVP to Alex Garland for actually crafting this story from start to finish. And as I said earlier, I don't want to belabor the point. I don't want to repeat myself, but like knowing when you're writing 28 years later that you're also writing 28 years later, The Bone Temple, you're not going to go off fan reaction. You're not going to go off how the movie was received. You're not going to go off reviews. You have a story in your mind and it's been written. And this was done before we ever saw 28 years later. So he had no idea how people were going to react to Jimmy, how people were going to react to Dr. Kelson, how people were going to react to Spike. None of that. He wrote this story as one complete story, and obviously we know there's going to be a third part that I know they've plotted out. They've talked about that. Like they know where they're going in the third film, but they just haven't made it yet. But I think that's so brilliant. And Alex Garland is a really good writer. I would say 75% of what he's done I've liked. Men, not so much. And there's a couple other ones in there that aren't really my jam, but he's pretty consistent. And he always has a really good message in his scripts. And I also think it's a pretty marvelous thing to be able to work with an Oscar-winning director like Danny Boyle, who's brilliant in his own right, and then hand over a script to Nia DaCosta and have total trust that she's going to do right by his words. And she does. I mean, like I said, I think I love 28 Years Later. I'm terrible to tell you, I think I like 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple more. So I'm not like trying to compare them. They're all part of one
Yes,
universe.
I know what you mean.
But like what Nia DaCosta did was unbelievable. Like to take like the same writer, the same story, and then develop the way she did. But again, this is all Alex Garland's words. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's a feat. Like it really is. It's a marvelous feat that they pulled off. And so I guess my co MVP would be Nia DaCosta and Alex Garland. In fact, they found a way to work together and make this fucking brilliant film.
I said it earlier. I'd like to see them work together again. I think they're the right mix. I hope this is not their last collaboration.
Yeah. And listen. I love Danny Boyle. I want Danny Boyle around, but I wouldn't hate it if Nia DaCosta directed the third one. Just saying.
I wouldn't hate it either. I wouldn't. And I love Danny Boyle. Oh, do I love Danny Boyle? I really do. He's one of my favorite directors, generational director. Really, if you came up in the 90s, he's a very important voice in cinema. And again, for Nita Costa to step in his shoes, to step into his world and be a companion, like a true companion to his vision while still being something entirely her own I'm just so very impressed.
Yeah. Next category, Patrick, best scare. So when it comes to 28 years later, the Bone Temple, what is your best scare?
Damon, we may have talked drama and social commentary all night. Nia DaCosta, who we just talked about, brought the horror back because I think there was a big complaint for some people that 28 years later wasn't a horror movie enough, which I disagree with that idea anyway. I think they just did it in their own way. She said we're gonna have scares and big scares, and so I counted plenty of scares. One of them in particular was when this unnamed hunter was in the woods very quietly, probably searching to get a deer or something like that or a stag. Out of nowhere, these rage zombies just come exploding out of the bushes, and everybody right there was like, "Whoa, holy shit!" A lot of moments like that in this movie that where you are just butt pucker level 11.
It was a really good one. Also, I think one noticeable difference between this one and the last one, while there were the fast, hard charging zombies in the last one, the rage virus zombies, there were a lot more of them in this movie. Like there was no like, oh yeah,
Yes.
they're not walking very fast. Like they're like, oh yeah, they're
By her
coming for you.
request. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big difference in this movie. For me, Patrick, my best scare came, and it's not like one moment necessarily. It's the train car scene with Samson, where he's kind of hallucinating his past, and then you realize he's in a car full of rage zombies, and they all come for him. And it's a pretty harrowing sequence because you're flashing back and forth between his memory and reality, and they're coming for him. Like they're coming to kill Samson now because they see humanity in him. They do not see one of their own anymore. And it's just a very harrowing sequence because it keeps flashing back and forth between what he thinks he's seeing from his past and what's actually happening now in the present. And it's a pretty harrowing sequence because in that moment, I'm like, oh, fuck, they're going to kill Samson. They
Yeah.
don't. He makes it, but it's a very harrowing sequence.
Yeah, he's still Samson. He's still very physically one of the biggest, strongest people around. I mean, it's his body doing all the work. The rage virus is just making him insane, but he's still a big giant badass, and he's ripping to shreds and throwing rage zombies left and right. It's a great sequence.
Yeah, it's a really harrowing sequence. I don't know. Did anyone get hit with a cock hit? Did anyone do? I don't know.
I did. I was about the 10th row, and I did. He swung at one point and it hit me.
The
Right,
3D version, you will get hit with a cock in this movie. Patrick, let's talk about best kill. There are a lot of kills in this movie. So, what was your best kill in 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple?
My best kill was Jimmy Ma gets the hook. So you talked about that scene where the guy in the barn picks Jimmy Ma, thinking that she's a wafy, small woman that maybe he has a shot at getting her, and of course she's a highly skilled fighter, as you saw from the end of 28 Years Later, that they can move this way and move that way and strike you 10 times before you ever hit the ground. She's very much one of those people, even though she's a little touched and a little weird. She's an incredible fighter, and she has him dead to rights. She's got him. He's bleeding out. He's not doing too well. And then out of nowhere, she just freezes. You hear this like thud and freeze, and it's her getting the hook in the back of the head. The pregnant woman who was hiding in the rafters threw down a winch, big old iron winch, and it just burrowed right into the back of Jimmy Ma's head. And what I loved with Mia's choice here was to stay on the low angle, like from the guy's perspective as she's on top of him, and just stay there as her face slowly gets more and more flooded with blood. It was one of these moments where I was like, geez, that's eerie. And it feels very realistic. There's no comic amount of arterial spray or anything like that. It buries into the back of her head, blood starts to pool into her eyes and pool around the corners of her mouth because her brain is hemorrhaging rapidly and her mental state is quickly declining as the damage to her brain is taking over. Very harrowing scene. Very intense scene. Very, very intense scene. When this and we're going to get to that in a second. When this movie wants to get horrific, it gets very horrific.
It does, and that's a pretty great sequence too, because again, you clearly like he underestimates Jimmy Ma, and Jimmy Ma's like, oh yeah, I'm not just a cute little girl, and she's fucking him up, and he's dead to rights, and then she gets the hook in the back of her head. It's pretty brutal. For me, Patrick, best kill, I gotta give it, I gotta give it to the ending with Jimmy Crystal getting the knife in the gut and getting crucified. Because he's manipulated and basically turned all these people into his cult followers, which is what cult followers do. And when they finally realize, at least part of them finally realize, like, oh, you're bullshit, like you're not really Satan's son, and Jimmy Inc. in particular turns on him. It's just a great ending to that particular character, that particular storyline of them being finally like, okay, we're breaking free of your mind control, of your brainwashing us. You are not Satan's son. You are not some powerful all-being Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal. You are just some dude who's been carrying us on a hook for all this entire time, telling us bullshit. And when Jimmy stabs him, and you see the look on his eye of like, oh fuck, like they found me out. They finally found me out, and that look of fear, because the entire movie, Jimmy Crystal has like this weird, like not weird, but like this overwhelming arrogance. Like he can't believe that. Like when Jimmy Ma gets the hook in the back of her head, he's almost like this can't happen, And then the barn catches fire. Another one of his acolytes gets caught on fire. He's like, this can't happen. So he's like still in this mindset, like I can't be beaten. And then when Dr. Kelson's like, oh, you need to sacrifice yourself, you need to crucify yourself just like Jesus did for God. He's like, what? No, that's not gonna work. And just to see the look in his eye when his followers turn on him, it's just a great sequence, because that arrogance, that swagger that he's been carrying around this entire time fades away in an instant. And it's just a great kill in that moment of the look in his eye, when he's laying upside down crucified and he's just screaming bloody murder because he realizes it's all over. I just think that's like a perfect fitting end for him.
Is he dead though, Damon? I'm going to play Stranger Things conspiracy theorist right now. We don't see him die. Now he is hung upside down on a cross with a very bad wound in the side of his body and his wrists nailed to the cross. You got to wonder though. And somebody asked Jack O'Connell, they go, "Is Jimmy dead?" And he goes, "He could be deader."
You never know. I mean, what a great plot point. What a great plot point if Jimmy Crystal reappears somehow. It would be interesting. Yeah, you don't see him technically die, so you don't know. Patrick, next category, best gore. So there's a lot of gore in this movie. What is the best gore in 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple?
It's funny because no one will be able to say, oh, well, they heard the complaints that the other one, that 28 Years Later wasn't gory enough, so Bone Temple's gorier. Nope, they already wrote it. It was already written. They were already shooting it before they ever even released 28 Years Later. This movie is gory as shit. Nia said, we're doing a horror movie, folks. It's going to be nasty. And there is a point where after Samson decides to attack with his pack of rage zombies, he just decides to crack open a cold one, or excuse me, crack open the hot one, as in somebody's skull. He cracks somebody's skull open and just goes to town on some brains. And Nia DaCosta said, we're holding on this. We'll stay on this shot. And he digs into this brain cavity and literally just rips out brain matter. I mean, chunks of white and pink brain, and starts and just is gobbling at it. And I was like, wow, I haven't seen something this hardcore since When Evil Lurks. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, they do not pause and like, let's look away. No, let's watch him literally scoop out brains like he's eating sushi, and he's just putting it down, devouring it. It's pretty gruesome. It's kind of funny because my best gore doesn't involve rage zombies, and it is when Jimmy Crystal decides to pass along some charity to his hanging victims on the wall, and he flays them alive, literally skins them alive. It's fucking brutal. Like watching him literally skin this dude alive, peeling the skin off his chest, and watching him literally just peel this guy's chest off of him. And as the family watches on as this happens, it is absolutely horrific. And if you've ever watched Game of Thrones, one of the main characters in that movie is Roose Bolton, or that show, Roose Bolton. That literally the House Bolton's sigil is the flayed man. That's what they're
Yeah.
known for. They flay people, and it's only, sorry to get a little Game of Thrones mythology here, it's only when Ned Stark takes over, he's like, you can't do this shit anymore, man. You can't flay people alive. But he's like, once Ned Stark's out of the way, Bruce Bolton's like, fuck yeah, I'm going to flay people again. And that's literally what it means, just skinning them. He's literally skinning them. And that's what Jimmy Crystal does. And he's like, charity. We're going to give them charity. And he says that St. Nick or Old Nick gives him orders of what they're going to give for charity. And he decides they're going to flay these people alive. It's fucking brutal, man. It's just like, oh, it's so hardcore. They're all gagged. And he's just like carving off pieces of them. It's, whew, man, it's a rough watch.
Yeah, that one's wild, man. And, again, Nia DaCosta does not hold back in this movie. This movie is a drama. This movie can be funny. It can be very touching, but it is gory as shit. It's some of the goriest stuff. I mean, here's the thing. If it went neck and neck with Sinners last year, the biggest complaint anyone had about Sinners, they would say it wasn't a horror movie, which I fully disagree with, by the way, because it's literally a movie about vampires and they rip people to shreds. But horror for horror, Bone Temple's got Sinners in terms of just straight up gore, nastiness, kills, and scares.
Yeah, there's no doubt this is 100% a horror movie. Like, no, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, we're not confusing that.
Next category, can we survive this horror film? So when it comes to 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Now, I got to be honest, like, I was an English literature major in college. You're a filmmaker. Neither one of us are Dr. Kelson, so we're not coming up with a cure for the rage zombie virus. So I don't know. Do we end up as Jimmys? Where do we end up in this world?
That's a great question. I feel like I would not end up with the Jimmies. But also that probably means my life, right? Like if I don't want to hang with the Jimmies, then the Jimmies decide I hang. I think that's how it goes. So odds are good that I'm not a Jimmy, and odds are very good that I don't survive in those woods very long. I mean, they are treacherous. There's a couple of homesteaders here and there. Just knowing me and knowing my abilities as a survivalist, which are 0 to nil. Yeah, I don't think I make it out of this movie.
I've said for many years, and this is probably something sick and twisted, people listen to the show are going to be like, wow, Damon, you got to go to therapy. But I've said for a long time, I was like, man, if the zombie apocalypse ever happened, I would thrive. Like, I feel like I would thrive in the zombie apocalypse. Like, I'm like, I would become Negan. I would become I just know me. I'm like, I could absolutely do that shit. I think I would be Jimmy, not Jimmy Crystal. Like I would be a Jimmy, but like because like I'm putting myself in like age range where I grew up after all this. So like I knew what God was. I know what Iron Maiden is. Right. Like I'd be like Jimmy, I'm here for you, buddy. We can do this fucking song and dance, but you're not gonna be telling me it's Old Nick. Like if you want me to, we're gonna survive by killing people and doing some crazy shit in the zombie apocalypse. Cool. Just don't try to spook me with all your fucking weird shit. Just know I'm 6'3". I can be your Samson. I can be your fucking alpha. Okay, I can do that for you. But don't try to sell me on all your bullshit. So I think like just to be part, because obviously you're probably not going to survive on your own in this world. That's just pretty much impossible. You got to be with a group of people in some kind to even have a chance. So I would probably become a Jimmy, but I would have to be like Jimmy's henchman. I couldn't be one of the Jimmy's fingers where they're like doing whatever he tells them, and he's like, oh, old Saint Nick is here. No, fuck your Nick. Fuck your Satan. I know you're bullshitting, but we're gonna make it through this, buddy. You're just not gonna treat me like your other fingers. Like I'm gonna be the fucking fist.
It made me think. Have you ever met Chilus Perry? Have you guys ever been together in the same room?
I've interviewed him before, actually. Yeah.
And are you? Because you're a big dude. He's a big dude. Is he bigger than you? Is he?
He is. I think he's 6'5". I think he's like 6'5", if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I'm 6'3", so he's a little bit bigger.
So a couple inches in height, about 1.5 feet in dong.
Yeah, but that's generous measurement. Yeah, but I'm saying and because I'm not a rage zombie, like I do have some faculties to me, so I think I could be okay in that regard. So I'm gonna say like I survived. Now, do I survive this whole thing? I don't know because all the Jimmys die, so I guess technically I'd probably die, but. That's where I would say like my survival would probably take place is because I know I'm not going to be a loner in that way, and I'm not going to be Dr. Kelson because I'm not a doctor. So probably being Jimmy's henchman and people are like, man, that's fucked up. I'm just being real. I'm being honest.
When I think about like actually trying to manipulate my way into the Jimmys, I would try to make my way to being Jimmy Crystal. Is probably what I would do. But the odds are stacked against you. It's a tough road.
Yeah, but the whole fight to the death thing. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, let's. I already had thoughts about the fight to the death. I go, oh, well, you should have done this instead.
I'm just saying, like, no offense, the the Jimmies are all like 5'7". Like, I'm not saying they're not badasses, but I'm like, sheer
They're not
size
big
alone.
people.
I'm like, sheer size alone, I'm going to beat most of you just because I'm 6'3" and I fucking, know martial arts. Like, you're not you're not gonna get the better of me. So
Yeah, they're not a big bunch.
Jimmy would welcome me into the fold, is what I'm saying. So
if he's smart,
Patrick,
yes.
last category is always, is it scary? So when it comes to 28 years later, The Bone Temple, is this movie scary?
Just on the flat horror side of things, it is. I mean, Nia DaCosta does not spare the scares for the drama and the messages. It's all in there. Is this movie so much more than scary? Absolutely. It's all of those things and that much more. And yeah, good luck the rest of the year. We're fucked. We're fucked because I don't know how another horror movie is going to beat this year. I'm very curious to see the horror movie that tops this because like on some lists, people, went, oh, Sinners, I loved it. I think it's one of the best movies of the year. But on my horror list, probably number 7 because that's kind of light on horror. You can't say that about Bone Temple. You can't say Bone Temple's light on horror. You can't say it's light on scares. You can't say it's light on gore. Jesus, the French extremities would say, please cut it down a little bit. It's a little much. Cut it down. This, when she wants to go horror, Nia DaCosta goes horror.
This movie is everything you could want in this kind of a movie. It's scary, it's horrific, it's gory, it's bloody, it's harrowing, it's funny at moments. And I'm going to pay this movie a compliment that I just kind of thought of in the back of my head because I mentioned earlier the George Romero movies. And if you go back to the George Romero zombie movies, the Dead movies, the original trilogy, everyone came, if you ever hear George Romero talk about, like, he didn't make Night of the Living Dead specifically with like the racial overtones and things, like it kind of came after the movie and he kind of realized he unknowingly made like a very powerful political statement with this movie, not even really trying to do it at the time. And then when you watch Dawn of the Dead and you watch Day of the Dead, it's much more purposeful, which I think of those 3 movies, I think most people agree that Dawn of the Dead is probably, not that you have to rate them, but if you're going to rate them, Dawn of the Dead is probably the best of the 3. Now, they're all great. I love all 3 movies. But that was the perfect zombie movie for a lot of reasons because it was a great zombie movie, it was a great humanity story, it was a great zombie story, it was a great horror movie, but it said something. Now, you know me, Patrick, I don't think any movies have to say something. I don't think you need to explain to people what things say. I've heard this, there's a big argument on TikTok right now about movies that say things, and I'm like, take from it what you will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you think it's a great story and you had a great time watching it, but you didn't get like the undertone of what the story was, I don't care. That's not what movies are meant for you to appreciate. And just because you didn't get I don't want to make people feel stupid because they don't get the underlying message. What you saw in 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is probably not the exact same thing I saw in 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. But here's my compliment to pay this movie. This is the first, I'm saying this seriously, and I love 28 Years Later, but I'm saying this seriously. This is the first movie that had so much to say on every level, from like the characters to the execution to the story to the horror to the acting. This is the first movie I can reminds me of Dawn of the Dead. Like, it's that good. It's everything you could want in a movie like this. And yeah, it's horrific. Yeah, it's scary. Yeah, it's well written. Yeah, it's well acted. It's everything. Like, I can't think of another example of a movie in this genre that pays off as much as this does compared to something like Dawn of the Dead. I'm not kidding. I know that's like a huge compliment to pay this movie, but that's how much I appreciate what they did in this movie.
I don't know what else I can say other than go see The Bone Temple on the biggest screen you can with the loudest speakers you can. It's every possible cinematic experience you're looking for. All of them. It's all of them in one movie. And it still doesn't feel like too much. It still doesn't feel lost in its own ideas. It's focused. It's simplistic, yet very deep and very rich. I don't know what else to say, Damon. It's the best movie I've seen all year.
It is. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention the actual scariest moment in this movie is when Shia Lewis Perry's dong comes flying at you, but that's a whole other conversation. But
don't watch this in 3D if you have fears about that.
Yes, that might be the scariest moment of this entire movie. All right, Patrick, that is our episode for this week. 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is in theaters right now. I cannot suggest for you enough to go see this movie. Go see it on the big screen. I'm going to go see it again. Like, I know I'm going to go see it again. I don't know when, but I'm going to go see this again in the theater. I left the theater and I was like, can I see another showing like tomorrow? Like, that's how much I like this movie. It's like, I think I want to see it again tomorrow. I didn't, but I'm like, I'm going to go see this again in the theater before it's gone. So go see it in the theater. It is so worth your time. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcast, Spotify. Over on our YouTube channel, just search Rewind of the Living Dead on YouTube. You'll find us over there, and find us on our website, rewindofTheLivingDead.com, where we post episodes. We also post additional reviews, trailers, news stories, all kinds of cool shit over there. So rewindofTheLivingDead.com, and also patreon.com/rewindoflivingdead if you want early access to every single episode, bonus episodes, our Film Corps podcast. Everything is over there. $5 a month. Support your boys. And go to patreon.com/rewindoflivingdead. It means the world to us if you subscribe, so we appreciate that. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, your thoughts on Chai Lewis Perry's Dong. I mean, 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Yeah, hit us up on email, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That is rot, livingdead@gmail.com, or hit us up on social media. Once again, you can find us on Twitter/X, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead and you'll find us over there. You can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, to everyone that tunes in the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you then.
Peace.